Hi, my name is Joseph. Welcome to Digimon Seekers Chapter 3, Part 11, Unit 11, Digital Missing in Action. Let's go ahead and begin with the first quote. My name is Koski Kisikata, the man said, finally revealing his identity to EG. Koski, nice to meet you, EG returned. Are you sure you want him to know that? Doraemon asked, concern creeping into their voice. Iju didn't get the feeling that he was a particular concern, so much as Doraemon was just generally worried of everyone and everything. Their attitude was only jarring in contrast to Logomon's self-absorption and Postmon's impishness. It's only fair. And here I thought a healthy bit of asymmetry made for easier negotiating. That's an unusual last name, Kasekata. Ichi said, breaking up the pedantic argument that was brewing between Koski and Doraemon. So I won't lie, I like this quote mostly for superficial details. What I like a lot so much about it is that it really, again, highlights, I say again, but I haven't mentioned it in this video, but I'm thinking about the previous video, how I mentioned I like the relationship that's being set up between Doraemon and Koski. I love how Koski made a point to say that they're working together, essentially, and that's emphasized in this part too, which we actually I'm gonna read from. And yeah, I think this really shows that again in this world of Digimon Seekers, Digimon are not just tools, and not only as Seekers has been saying, Digimon are alive, right? They're also one's. They can be one's partner, and one is fortunate enough to work with Digimon. Essentially, just really emphasizing the individualized nature of Digital monsters, and I really appreciate that. I think that's cool. But I think I was going to say the show. I think Seekers kind of shot itself in the foot a little bit with its diction, and I'll explain what I mean by that once we get to it. It'll be something we read from as well. What I also like about this quote, though, is just the descriptors that's used to describe Logomon and Impmon. I actually laughed out loud when I read the description for Logomon, his self-absorption. I think that's a really great way to describe him. I've been struggling sometimes to think of an adjective to discuss, or rather to describe. I don't want to use describe again since I use that word, but to describe Logomon. And I've been saying words like arrogant mostly, but I don't mean, usually when we say arrogant, that's really a negative word, right? But sometimes I think arrogance could be an endearing trait depending on how one acts and behaves, and I would say that that's a great way to describe Logomon. His arrogance is self-absorbed. But again, with that being said, Logomon always seems to be keeping the community in mind as long as he's at the top. All right, so I laughed out loud at that description. I thought it was a good description. And yeah, so that's, like I said, this is more of a superficial element. Moving on, Ichi felt some of the lingering doubts about Koski lift, replaced by a deep sense of empathy. Excuse me. Let me go up a little bit more. Oh, okay. I'm not going to lie. The word lift being used here, that confused me. That threw me off. I was like, what was Koski lifting? But I read the previous line to give me some quick context. So just in case it's needed, I'll read that as well. But the lift that's being used here is lift as in, I had some mistrust towards you, but your actions has lifted that. I now do trust you. So, excuse me. So Koski lost someone too, along with her partner Digimon. Ichi felt some of the lingering doubts about Koski lift, replaced by a deep sense of empathy. Are we the same? That's why I became a code cracker, Koski continued. From then on, he dedicated his life to saving the person who'd gone DMIA. He opened a virtual monitor displaying a grim message board post asking for information on something Ig recognized immediately. A black Agumon, Ig shouted. It was the same one he'd seen 100 million DC reward for not long ago. Marvin told him that was mere pocket change for Tartarus. This black Agumon was a partner Digimon of the crew member who went DMIA. I want to find them. So I do think this is very interesting because when we were getting the descriptors of the original group when they went on Operation Tartarus, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the partner Digimon of the individuals was Tantomon, Palmon, and then we had an Agumon. To my understanding, I don't believe it was the Agumon was described as a black Agumon, but rather just as an Agumon. My bad, I don't like to call it Digimon. The it only came out right there because I was thinking about the coloring. Agumon's coloring. That's why it slipped out because the color was my primary focus. And obviously, color is not alive. It's not sapient. So I am still interested to know if this is the same Agumon that Saya was working with. If it was it just a translation error then that they forgot, they being the writers, forgot to include Black Agumon from the get go? Or did maybe Agumon transform somehow into the Black Agumon? And yeah, so I just find that very intriguing. I am hopeful that we'll come back to that in the future. I'm really hopeful it's not just a translation there. The story actually meant Black Agumon from the get go. But again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it was Tentomon, Palmon, and Black Agumon, not just an Agumon. Um, and then continuing forward, it's really cool to see that this Black Agumon's being mentioned again. In case one forgot, this Black Agumon has not been in the story since essentially chapter 1, part 1, whereas it's mentioned right here. E.G. first encounters a post, and he believes this post is too dreamlike. Well, not dreamlike, but too far-fetched, since that is a lot of money just to find a Black Agumon. But yeah, so I do like that a lot. What I also like about this line as well is that it really reveals how organized the Sons of Chaos are. Marvin told E.G. that 100 million DC was mere pocket change for Tartarus. That's a very interesting line because it's like, where is Tartarus getting his funds from? I'm going to have to assume, because the way that it was described, I don't think he's a wealthy individual. Definitely not wealthy enough to support an entire group. It wouldn't surprise me if rather what's going on, because it does seem like Koski is a personable individual. He's charismatic, so it wouldn't surprise me if he was able to network, and through the groups that he formulated, rather than through the Sons of Chaos that he created, he was able to meet someone that would allow for easier funding for the group. But yeah, let me make sure that's everything. I also like how they put in parentheses, they being the writers, they put E.G. thinking, are we the same? Are we the same as in they've both suffered through a similar event and the loss of someone that they know to DMIA. Moving forward, could the data actually make sure, okay, I was making sure that was the top of the quote that I want to read from. Could the data in this syringe really wake Leon from his coma? It contains a medical grade stimulant. Okay, E.G. said, thrown by the scary sounding description of it all. It reminded him of the kind of dangerous drugs he'd been told to avoid. It should, in theory, peel the human consciousness away from the Digicore, granting a window for self-awareness to return. And you're sure that's possible? Well, the drug was originally formulated with the goal of extending the amount of time one could safely mind link. Oh yeah? In the simplest terms, the medicine increases focus. So like this stuff, E.G. said, picking up his energy drink, a little energy boost you could mind link for a little bit longer. It made sense enough to E.G. anyhow. The side effects prevented it from being widely used, but it showed promise as a drug that might be able to separate a DMIA patient's consciousness from the partner Digimon's Digicore. Entirely in NI-simulated trials, of course. Said experiments were conducted with real Digimon using an AI copy of a human subject consciousness to stimulate a DMIA patient's consciousness. When the medicine was administered, the stimulation determined that the AI copy could be successfully separated from the Digicore. So there's two elements to this quote. The first element that I want to discuss is I like this description of the syringe. Let me go ahead and find it specifically. The drug was originally formulated with the goal of extending the amount of time one could safely mind link. When I first read that, that confused me, that threw me off a bit, because I was wondering to myself, well, if one is already in a coma, would you want something that allows them to become more entwined with their digital partner's consciousness? In other words, getting even further away from this consciousness, because if it helps you to focus and what you're doing currently is mind linking, wouldn't that be focusing on that aspect? And I love how they go on, they being the writers, they go on to describe, well, the drug was originally formulated with the goal of extending the amount of time one could safely mind link. The side effects prevented it from being widely used, but it showed promise as a drug that might be able to separate a DMI patient's consciousness from their Digimon's Digicore, entirely in NA-simulated trials, of course. And what I like about this essentially is the trial and error. So what was originally meant for this syringe was to, like this energy booster, to stay mind linked for a bit longer. That failed, but the results showed that, well, maybe even though the consciousness is being separated, that's actually going to be helpful if anything ever went awry. And so I do like that. I think it really shows the natural progression of again, these individuals who are pioneering this new adventure into the digital world. This is all something that's new for them. It's not just an adventure, but it's something that they want to go in and map out, something that they want to, well, again, pioneer, right? Hopefully that makes sense. I haven't talked about that mostly since chapter 1. And I mentioned it a little bit, I think, in chapter 3. But again, to reiterate how in Digimon Adventure 1 and 2, they were on an adventure, hence the name of adventure. And then with Tamers, at the end, when they do go to the digital world, that was a choice to save someone. They were kind of forced into it. So when I say it's a choice, it wasn't as in, oh, the digital world exists. Let's go ahead and explore it. So I guess it wasn't through agency, because again, it was to rescue Kiyomon, not Kiyomon, Kulimon. I forgot the Digimon's name, the one that allows Digimon to digivolve. For Digimon Seekers, on the other hand, the closest that I could think of is Digimon Frontier. The Tarzan kid, I forgot his name, unfortunately. Oh, Ikito. His parents was part of a group, and Professor Kuruto as well, the villain. They were the ones who were researching into the digital world by choice. It wasn't because someone was kidnapped or someone was being held ransom. So these kinds of details, going back to Seekers, about how they were trying to create a tool to help them with mind linking. As it turns out, it wasn't successful, but now that they discovered that there's pitfalls about exploring the digital world, DMIA, they could use this, what they thought was a failed experiment, to create something else. Rather than a booster for mind linking, we'll create a possible cure for DMIA. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. That's just really like it. I think it adds to the immersion of the story. And yeah, so moving forward, Aberdeen Electronics' own DDL had developed a potential cure for DMIA patients, one made by Professor Ruzenji, no less. On second thought, of course he had. No one else could have done it, but something kept tugging at the back of E.G.'s brain. Why would a bunch of code crackers develop something like this? E.G. had to ask every last question on his mind if he was going to trust these two. We made a deal with Professor Ruzenji, Doromon said calmly. What? What kind of deal? We provide him with the drug, he gives us all the clinical data resulting from the trials. Those are the terms. It made sense to E.G. If these weren't trials to be run on AI copies, but on real DMIA patients, it'll have to take place in the lawless digital world, on codecracker patients who operate outside the law to begin with. So as always, the professor always seems to have his hands involved somehow. I've been saying this since the beginning. I don't think this is a bad thing. And logically, I think this makes a lot of sense, because who's DMIA? Not just his personal student, Leon, but also before that, it was his daughter, right? Not just someone who was part of his team, but again, his actual family member, his relative. And sorry guys, I was looking something about him because I thought I saw something on my phone. That's why I'm expecting a message. Anywho, so sorry for that distraction. I know my cat is leaking something, but that's, if you guys hear that noise, that's her. Anywho, so yeah, so he always seems to have his hands involved, but again, I think logically this makes sense. It's his daughter, it's his personal, I don't want to say favorite student, but a student that he's personally involved with. And so I think it would make a lot of sense that he would have, be willing to work with the SOC in order to develop this cure. I trail off a little bit just because I'm thinking about the beginning of the story and the way that the professor had E.G. become a spy. Yet it seems like the professor was already working with the SOC. Unless this cure that they came up with, they being the professor, maybe this was more a recent phenomenon. Maybe this occurred after Leon went into a coma, and thus, with nowhere really else to go, with his back against the wall, that's what made, or that's what convinced the professor to work with Tartarus. I'm just trying to make sense of the timeline. But I'm sure I have faith in the story that everything will be explained neatly as we continue with the story. Excuse me, I unhighlighted my quote by accident, so let me make sure that's everything I want to discuss. Oh, yeah. I also really, as always, I like any textual evidence to suggest that E.G. is not a stupid individual. I love this line. E.G. had to ask every last question on his mind if he was going to trust these two. Just really emphasizing that E.G. is being careful. He's not just talking with individuals that he shouldn't be talking with. He's making sure to keep in mind, are these individuals that he can trust? Especially with the last part when he kept in mind how part of the agreement with the professor was to keep Logomon a secret, to not discuss the hollowisation with anyone. So I just really appreciate this emphasis on E.G.'s cautiousness. You trust Professor Rugenji, don't you? E.G. said without thinking. Do you not? I do, absolutely, Iji replied without hesitation. Knowing the drug came out of D4 is enough for me. Not to mention I'm a wanted code cracker, and here you are in the real world coming to me with all of this. I believe you, and I trust Professor Ruzenji. It all wrote together perfectly in Iji's mind, and they both trust the professor that much they could trust one another too. So can we count on your cooperation, Iji? Logomon, Doromon asked. Yeah, you're in too, right, pal? You bet. I'll jab the needle right into that little spark plug's butt myself, Logomon gleefully answered. How wonderfully crass, Doromon sniped. That's enough out of you. You want to go? Okay, let's stop there before we do anything we'll regret, Iji said, trying to placate his partner Digimon. Iji was once again reminded just how much Logomon hated being locked down, hated being looked down upon. Iji wondered if it was some sort of wolf-like pride hard-coded into their being. So what I like about this quote is just I think the reason why they're discussing the professor is not just for the character's sake, but also for the audience sake. It wouldn't surprise me if there were still some individuals who has some distrust towards the professor, because again, whenever something about the digital world comes up, it always seems the professor is there. He's present for that, right? Despite him having all these separate groups that he's working with to, I would argue, investigate research into the digital world. We know he's working with the Digipolice. We know he's indirectly, or maybe sometimes directly, works with the SOC. And we also know that he created Iji's little partnership to infiltrate the SOC in order to figure out what they're trying to do with the digital world. And lastly, we have Leon, who I am curious. I wonder if the professor was aware that Leon was acting as a vigilante, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was aware and he didn't say anything about it. So I like the fact that Koski is talking about the professor with Iji, and they're just really emphasizing, do these individuals trust the professor? And if they do trust him, I think that's meant as a sign for the audience that we, the readers, can trust the professor as well. And yeah, what I also like about this too is that it really emphasizes the professor. He's not just someone who uses people. He's not just someone who does experiments and projects and that's it. The fact that Koski says that he trusts or rather, let me rephrase that. The fact that Iji notices that Koski trusts the professor, and he asks him directly, and then Koski asks him, "Don't you trust the professor?" And Iji's response is unwavering loyalty, essentially. Not loyalty, because that might be looked at negatively by some, as if Iji is being used. But his unwavering devotion to the professor, I think, is meant to show to the readers again that the professor can be trusted. So I'm really looking forward to the professor's storyline. If he does end up being an antithetical force, I'm not going to lie, I am going to be disappointed about that. And what I also like about this line, is of course the interaction between Logo, rather the declaration from Logomon, his confidence. The last time, well, I shouldn't say the last time, but when we saw that Logomon was discussing Leon with Iji and parts way back when in like part 1 or 2, whatever it may have been before that flashback, we saw that Logomon, despite the negative situation, he was willing to do some action. He was willing to figure out what to do, right? And before Tartarus came, Iji got a little bit upset because he realized that they can't search for Leon in the real world. They need to go into the digital world. So I just really appreciate this further emphasis on Logomon's being up to save Ipmon. So much so that he's saying these crazy little lines. Let me make sure that's everything. And then I guess they always had to mention, they be the writers, how Logomon hates being looked down upon, that self-absorption. Iji wondered if it was some kind of wolf-like pride. They keep mentioning that little aspect. I do wonder if it's just a behavior trait of Logomon, or maybe something will come out of this. For right now, it's just a detail that I think is meant to give flavor to Logomon. I don't think it will play any major plot relevance in the future. Right, so let's lay out the situation. Iji said, glancing between quotes. Oh, pardon me, before I continue, in that previous quote, I also like how Iji right away recognizes that if he allows Logomon to keep talking, he's going to accidentally, inadvertently turn this into a negative situation. Rather than these individuals planning on what to do with this syringe, it's going to devolve into Logomon trying to aid Doromon into a battle. I was going to say I was going to combine fist fight into battle. Excuse me, into a battle. And I would argue that Doremon probably would not engage in that, right? I could imagine Logomon just constantly saying rude statements and Doremon just standing there like, oh, come on, man, let's continue moving forward. But thankfully, they didn't get to that point because Iji was there to act as a mediator. So anyway, going forward, all right, so let's lay out the situation. Iji said, glancing between Kosuke and Doremon, I very much doubt you, the vaunted leader of the SOC, has been haphazardly looking for a lost Digimon. You got the possible DMI cure on you, but now we need a plan for this little search party. Well, look who's on top of things, Logomon said, offering Iji the rare genuine compliment. So as one could probably tell, I like this quote because again, it emphasizes Iji's astute nature, the way that he's able to think about the way he's able to be a forward thinker and take into consideration the present moment, what he just learned, and making sense of that. And then of course I like this quote as well because Logomon, anything that within any Digimon property that emphasizes the relationship between Digimon and their human partners, I always personally really appreciate. I just really like. Also again, because I am biased, I do have my cat here, right? And again, I've mentioned this before, but I have another cat. Unfortunately, he's not as well, he's friendly, but he's not as open to the pub. Well, let me rephrase that. If one comes to visit, he is open to that. But in terms of like actually hanging out and stuff like that, he has his own set places that he likes to hang out at. And then of course I have my dog, as I mentioned, and my rabbits too. So I just like any time where Digimon emphasizes the relationship between, again, the partner and the human. But yeah, moving forward. So this one's a little bit of a long quote, but I like it, so I'll explain why I like it after. Sorry, excuse me, I'm gonna drink some water really quickly. I'm recovering from a slight cold that I had a couple of days ago. So, excuse me. I've explained the terms of what's at stake. Are you coming or not? Kosuke asked pointedly. Yes, lead the way. There's no turning back. Be prepared to say goodbye to your old life. No more three-mat apartment. No more meager savings. No more laws. No more whatever Ichi thought he knew. Once you dove into the network, it was just the data of your consciousness and the partner Digimon to which it fused. Nothing else mattered. You could break free of the real world and then transcend it. In that case, I have nothing to regret. More importantly, I now know I have nothing to fear, Iji said resolutely. There's been this hole where my heart should be. All my losses hollowed me out, and I'm done waiting for someone to fill me back up. It's time to act no matter how scary it might feel or how far from home it takes me. I have to do whatever I can, Iji said resolutely. Kosuke nodded approvingly. Embrace the loss and regret, the constraints of your freedom, and hold them close. That's how we code crackers survive. That's the only way I know how to live, Iji said with a smile. Freedom for the network, freedom for the digital world. So this really emphasizes Iji's, again, although he was down to the dumps, once he convinced himself to commit to an action, even if he didn't know what it was specifically, I think that's all that Iji needed to do to begin with. He needed to compose himself, and although it is a drastic situation, and I can't imagine what he would be doing if Todorus didn't come to visit, but I would hope that Iji would have recognized that, because don't forget, before Todorus came, Iji couldn't mind link because of his physical health, but I would hope that Iji would recognize what he needs to do to become better. Yes, it would have been difficult, but hopefully Logomon would have been there to act as support, and then once they recuperated, mind link and determine the best way forward and discovering each Leon. In other words, what I'm trying to emphasize is that even if Todorus didn't come to visit, I think Iji would have stood back up eventually and pushed himself forward. And I think this quote really emphasizes that as textual evidence too, because it's reminding us, the reader, that Iji is not just an individual who acts, but rather he acts because of his life experience, the things that led him to the current point where he's at. And unfortunately, he's an individual who does have some tragic elements in his life, right? I mean, he lost his parents in an accident that was not supposed to occur in the first place. So again, what I like about this quote is just it highlights Iji's confidence. It highlights his ambition, not ambition for himself, but ambition to do what's right and to correct the situation that he feels that he created, and that situation being the fight between himself and Leon that led into the Royal Knight coming out of the vortex and thus taking away Leon from the playing board, right? And what I also like about this quote, I think it was done really well, how when Iji starts thinking, when Kosuke says there's no turning back, everything that you knew is going to change. You could break free of the real world and then transcend it. I like to think that that's a statement that EG, I was not stated that he was thinking about this, it's just a statement that EG was keeping in mind while Kosuke was talking, hence his reply, in that case, I have nothing to regret. More importantly, I now know I have nothing to fear, because since he has nothing to come back to, he doesn't have to be worried about, as just a general example, let's just pretend paying rent, buying groceries and so forth, right? He's going to go away from this place, as Kosuke said, and he needs to accept that. Rather than being afraid of that, it's just further evidence for EG sorry, let me start over. Rather than being nervous or afraid about that, for EG, it's just further evidence to allow him to be confident in moving forward. Well, if what he's about to commit to has no going back, then he can't be nervous. He can't be scared. He has to move forward. Excuse me, I know I was stumbling a lot right there. Again, I'm recovering a little bit from a cold, so I do thank you for your patience. Hopefully one can't tell, but I'm doing my best to not let it show. Anywho, and then continuing forward though, I love how it ends when EG says, embrace the loss and regret the constraints of your freedom and hold them close. That's how we code crackers survive. That's Kosuke saying that. And then EG's response, that's the only way I know how to live. And he says that, excuse me, that was a hiccup. And EG said that with a smile. Freedom for the network, freedom for the digital world. I just think that was a natural progression, the way we go from EG thinking about himself and where's that line? You could break free of the real world and transcend it, and then it ends with once EG makes his choice, that declaration, that logo, that not logo, but the slogan that for the SOC, or rather for code crackers in general, I believe it is, and not just for the Sons of Chaos. Freedom for the network, freedom for the digital world. I just thought it was a really cool way to bring up that phrase and in association to EG and Kosuke and what they're about to do. I won't pretend I know exactly what you've been through, but you're always welcome to dump your consciousness into my Digicore. I won't even charge you for the privilege, Logomon said, muscling the way into the conversation. Oh, Logomon, excuse me, that was my cat. She dropped something. She's scratching herself. Oh, Logomon, I'll even come play with you sometime soon, if it'll help you with that hole in your heart, Logomon said. EG simply reached out and placed his hand on the interface on their forehead. Logomon gently leaned into it. I love that, pal, EG said quietly. You got it. Kosuke looked on approvingly, emboldened by the newly strengthened bond between EG and his partner Digimon. Then our target is the gateway. We're going to crack our way into the depths of the digital world, he bellowed. And that's the end of part 11. What I really like about this quote is, so before this, one aspect that I was really kind of concerned about was how Logomon really showed his appreciation or his care towards EG. And again, I think that makes sense because that's just Logomon's personality. For example, I don't know if this is an extreme example, but if one was in a mafia, the boss of the mafia, I'm sure he cares about his underlings, the people beneath him, right? That sounds negative, but just bear with me. But he's not going to show it. If he's a good boss who communicates with the people that he works with, he's going to have this tough demeanor that's exterior to himself, right? So that's how I was viewing Logomon. And I was hopeful that he did care about EG as their partners, right? And they kind of did hint at it a couple of times where Logomon, when he fought Leon, I believe he makes a statement that since he's partners with EG, they'll get things done. But I think this is the first real instance in the story where Logomon's choosing to not say something, putting his paw in his mouth, as the saying goes. But it's just a statement where Logomon's actually being positive and he's thinking of the community, and he's actually just being a little bit vulnerable right here. So I really appreciate how, even though he's being vulnerable, it's still in that classic Logomon kind of way, right? I won't even charge you for the privilege, like it's like, again, that self-absorption, right? But I think it fits really well with Logomon. Obviously, since he's a leader of a district, that it plays into this as well. I didn't read the quote, but there was a quote of that Dormon is just like Logomon. He too is a leader of one of the districts. So it's looking like the prototype Digimon. That might be true for Ryudomon as well. I'm really hoping we'll get more information about Ryudomon. Despite Chapter 3 having Yolene, the Digicore, I feel like we being the audience have learned a lot more about the Sons of Chaos. Not even the Sons of Chaos as a group, but just more about Tartarus as an individual. I'm pretty sure the next part, I combine chapter with part. I'm pretty sure the next part, Yolene will be making her appearance, because if one does watch the trailer, Koski and Yolene do have a verbal exchange, and I'm really looking forward to that. I know I keep saying it, but as we continue with the story, all these characters, I just really do stand by them. I love that EG's now working directly with Tartarus and Koski, and Koski is not hiding his identity. And not only are they working together, but they're doing exactly what the goal of Tartarus was to begin with, or excuse me, the goal of Sons of Chaos was to begin with, and that's to discover a cure for DMIA, to rescue Saya, and now thus an extension, Leon. I'm looking forward to the return of Marvin. I can't wait for the interaction between Marvin, EG, and Koski. I think that'd be a fun little interaction. And I am still hopeful that in the future, in my head, I'm pretty sure once the antagonists finally reviews themselves, Yolene and Koski will come back together to work together as a team rather than being pitted against one another. And personally, I am looking forward to that. I am still hopeful that Tentomon and Palmon will make a return. And lastly, that we'll get an explanation of the whole Agumon and Black Agumon exchange. I suppose my question for everyone for this part is, what do you think is going on with that Black Agumon situation? Was that just a translation error, and it was a Black Agumon to begin with, or was that not a translation error and Agumon somehow did transform into a Black Agumon? As always, thank you so much for listening / watching. I really do appreciate it. Oh no, I broke my little tradition. I forgot to post up my my Vital Bracelet, not placard, but you guys know what I mean. I forgot what it's called, but yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your patience too, especially when I did stumble. I feel like I stumbled a bit more than I usually do in this video. Have a great day, have a prodigious day, and take care.